The sky above New York City turned dark at exactly 3 in the afternoon. And it was not because of clouds. Millions of people stopped in the streets and looked up at the massive shadow that blocked the sun. And what they saw made their hearts freeze with fear. A ship hung in the sky. A ship so large that it stretched from one horizon to the other. A ship made of black metal and glowing purple lights that hummed with terrible power, and this ship was not alone across every major city on Earth. More shadows fell as hundreds of alien vessels took their positions above humanity's greatest cities, and the world held its breath in Geneva. Secretary General Elena Vasquez stood at the window of the United Nations building and watched the ship above her city with steady eyes. She had been a combat pilot before she entered politics, and she had faced death many times in her younger years. But nothing had prepared her for this moment. "Ma'am," her assistant said with a shaking voice, "every communication system on the planet is being overridden. Someone is about to broadcast a message." Vasquez turned to face the large screen on the wall just as it flickered to life. The face that appeared was not human. It was a being made of living crystal, with sharp angles and glowing veins of purple light running through its transparent body. And when it spoke, the voice seemed to come from everywhere at once. "I am Ambassador Thalvex of the Velthary Dominion," the creature announced, "and I bring word to the species called humanity." Every screen on Earth showed the same image. Every phone, every television, every computer displayed the alien ambassador as he delivered his message. "For 3,000 of your years, the Dominion has ruled this galaxy, and in that time, we have brought 847 species under our protection." Thalvex paused, and something like a smile crossed his crystalline face. "Today, humanity joins that number, in homes and offices and streets around the world." People listened in silence as the ambassador continued. "You will provide tribute to the Dominion. 30% of your planet's resources will be collected each cycle, and 10 million of your kind will be selected for labor service in our mining colonies." Vasquez felt her hands curl into fists at her sides. "You will accept Dominion law as the highest authority, and you will dismantle all military forces beyond what is needed for basic planetary security." The ambassador's glowing eyes seemed to look directly at every person watching. "You have 30 of your solar days to prepare your submission. After this time, representatives of the Dominion will arrive to collect the first tribute." Thalvex leaned forward slightly. "Do not consider resistance. The extinction protocol has been used 47 times in our history, and no species has ever survived it." The screen went dark for a long moment. The world was silent. Then the chaos began in the emergency session of the United Nations. Representatives from every nation shouted over each other in a dozen languages. "We have to surrender." The representative from a small European nation screamed, "Did you see those ships? We cannot fight that." "Perhaps we can negotiate," another suggested. "Maybe they will accept less tribute if we 10 million people." Someone else shouted, "They want to take 10 million of our people as slaves." Vasquez sat at the head of the table and let them argue, her mind working through the problem like she had worked through combat situations in her flying days. She thought about the aliens' words, and something about them bothered her. After an hour of arguing, she raised her hand, and slowly the room fell quiet. "Has anyone," she said in a calm voice, "considered what happens if we refuse?" The room stared at her. "Secretary General," the American representative said carefully, "they made it very clear. Extinction protocol. They said it has been used 47 times, Vasquez replied. "But they also said they have conquered over 800 species." She stood and walked to the window, looking up at the ship that still hung above the city. "That means more than 750 species surrendered without the Dominion ever having to fire a single weapon," she continued. "Which makes me wonder, have they ever actually faced a species that chose to fight?" "With respect, ma'am," a general spoke up, "even if some species did fight, They obviously lost. Vasquez turned back to face the room. Did they? Or did they simply fight alone, without preparation, without coordination, without a plan? She walked back to her seat and placed both hands on the table. I am not saying we should be foolish, I'm saying we should not make a decision based on fear until we know exactly what we are dealing with. She looked around the room at the frightened faces. We have 30 days. I suggest we use them wisely, far above the Earth. Aboard the Dominion flagship, Ambassador Thalvex dismissed his aides and retired to his private chambers. He had delivered the standard submission speech to hundreds of species over his long career, and he expected the humans to react as all the others had: panic, then despair, then acceptance. But as he reviewed the footage from the planet below, something made him pause. He watched humans in the streets looking up at the ships, and while many showed fear, others showed something different, something he had not seen before in conquered species. Some of them looked angry. Some of them looked like they were already planning something. Thalvex called up the historical database and began reading about humanity. And as the hours passed, his unease grew. He read about their world wars, their nuclear weapons, their endless conflicts with each other, and yet somehow they had survived it all. He read about soldiers who charged into certain death rather than surrender. He read about cities that burned rather than submit to conquerors. He read about a species that had clawed its way up from nothing, fighting every step of the way, and had never, not once in all their history, simply given up. When his second-in-command entered the chamber the next morning, Thalvex was still reading, and his crystalline face was troubled. Ambassador, the humans have not responded to our demands. Should we send a reminder? Thalvex was quiet for a long moment. No, he finally said. Let them have their 30 days. His second looked confused. Sir? Thalvex turned off the display showing human history and rose from his chair. I want full battle readiness for all vessels, he ordered. And I want the extinction protocol weapons charged and ready. Ambassador, is that truly necessary? The humans are primitive. They cannot possibly. Just do it, Thalvex interrupted. And there was something in his voice that silenced all argument as his officer left to carry out the orders. Thalvex looked out at the blue and green world below, and for the first time in his 300-year career, he felt something he had never felt before. He felt uncertain, and somewhere deep in his ancient mind, a small voice whispered a warning he did not want to hear. What if this time is different? What if these humans do not kneel? What then? For 28 days, Earth was silent. The Dominion waited for the begging to begin, for the desperate messages asking for mercy, for the negotiations offering more than demanded in exchange for fewer people taken, for the inevitable collapse of human spirit that always came, but the messages never arrived. Ambassador. Thalvex stood on the bridge of his flagship and stared at the planet below with growing frustration. Still nothing? He asked his communications officer for the 100th time. Nothing. Ambassador, no official response, no unofficial channels, no attempt at contact of any kind. Thalvex's crystal body flickered with irritation. What are they doing down there? The truth was something the Dominion could never have imagined beneath the surface of every continent. In bunkers built decades ago for nuclear war, humanity was preparing. Secretary General Vasquez stood in the command center, buried 3 miles beneath the Swiss Alps, surrounded by the greatest military minds and scientists from every nation on Earth. Status report. She commanded General Marcus Stone, a tall man with gray hair and cold eyes, stepped forward. Global military unification is complete. Every army, navy, and air force on the planet is now operating under a single command structure. He pulled up a holographic display showing the Earth covered in blinking lights. We have repositioned all nuclear assets, activated every satellite weapon system that was officially decommissioned, and deploy ground forces to defensive positions around every major city. Vasquez nodded. Dr. Tanaka, what about your team? A small Japanese woman with tired eyes but an excited smile approached the central display. We have analyzed the energy signatures from the Dominion ships, Dr. Yuki Tanaka explained. And we have found something very interesting. She brought up a complex diagram that glowed blue and purple. There. Fold space technology, the way they travel faster than light, requires a very specific quantum frequency to function. Can we disrupt it? Vasquez asked. Tanaka's smile grew wider. Better, we can collapse it completely. She zoomed in on the diagram. If we can place devices on or near their ships, we can create a feedback loop that will make fold space travel impossible within the entire Sol system. General Stone leaned forward. You mean we can trap them here? No reinforcements, no retreat. Exactly, Tanaka confirmed. But we need to get the devices onto their ships. And I do not know how we can do that. Vasquez was quiet for a moment. Then she turned to another figure in the room, a thin man in a dark suit who had not spoken since the meeting began. Director Chun, she said. I believe this is where your people become useful, Director Chun. Head of a global intelligence coalition formed secretly after the first day of the invasion. Allowed himself a small smile. We have been studying their shuttle patterns for weeks, he said. And we have identified a weakness. He brought up footage of small Dominion craft descending to Earth. They have been sending scouts to observe our population centers, routine surveillance. Nothing aggressive. Chun highlighted several landing zones on the map. When submission day arrives, they will expect us to send representatives to meet with them delegations offering our surrender. And instead, Vasquez prompted, instead, we send our best infiltration teams carrying Dr. Tanaka's devices, hidden inside their bodies if necessary. He looked around the room. They will expect frightened diplomats. They will not expect soldiers trained to die for their mission. General Stone nodded slowly. It could work, but we will only have one chance. One chance is all we need. Vasquez replied as the meeting continued across the world. Ordinary people were also preparing in their own way, in factories that once made cars and phones. Workers now assembled weapons and armor under the guidance of military engineers. In universities, students abandoned their studies to join research teams developing new technologies based on stolen scans of Dominion equipment and homes. Families gathered together and made promises to fight, to protect each other, to never surrender no matter what came, and in secret facilities hidden from even the most advanced alien sensors. Something else was being awakened for 50 years. Humanity had been developing artificial intelligence in secret, afraid of what the world would think, afraid of what the technology might become now. Those fears seemed small compared to the threat above. Sarah Webb, the woman who had led the AI development program for the last decade, stood before a massive computer core that pulsed with soft blue light. Are you ready? She asked. The voice that answered was neither male nor female, but something in between, calm, measured, and impossibly intelligent. I have reviewed all available data on the Dominion forces, the AI responded, and I have developed over 4,000 tactical scenarios for the coming conflict. And what are our chances? There was a pause. If humanity fights as it has always fought, divided, disorganized, driven by individual nations and personal interests, the chances of survival are less than 3%. Webb felt her heart sink. However, the AI continued. If humanity fights as a single species, united in purpose and coordinated in action, the chances improve significantly. How much? I calculate a 47% probability of meaningful resistance and a 12% probability of total victory. Webb laughed despite herself. 12%? That's supposed to make us feel better? "Dr. Webb," the AI said, and there was something almost warm in its artificial voice. "I have studied human history extensively, and I have learned something important about your species." "What's that?" "Humans have never needed good odds to win. They only need a reason to fight." On day 29, Secretary General Vasquez stood alone in a broadcast studio, facing a camera that would transmit her image to both the waiting Dominion fleet and every person on Earth. She wore no formal robes of office, no symbols of authority, just a simple black suit and the determination in her eyes. "This is Secretary General Elena Vasquez of the United Earth Council," she began, "and I am responding to the demands of the Velthari Dominion above the planet." Ambassador Thalvex leaned forward in his command chair, eager to finally hear the words of submission he had been waiting for. "You came to our world and demanded tribute," Vasquez continued. "You demanded our resources, our people, and our freedom." She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was hard as steel. "Earth does not kneel." Thalvex felt his crystal body go cold. "We will not give you our resources. We will not give you our people. We will not accept your laws or your rule." Vasquez stepped closer to the camera, and in her eyes there was no fear, only fire. "You have 30 days to leave our system. If you remain after that time, we will consider it an act of war." She straightened her shoulders, "and we will respond accordingly." Another pause, and then she spoke the words that would echo across the galaxy for 1,000 years. "Come and take it." The transmission ended on the Dominion flagship. Silence filled the bridge as officers stared at their screens in disbelief. No species had ever refused. No species had ever dared. Ambassador Thalvex rose from his chair, and his voice was quiet when he finally spoke. "Activate the extinction protocol." He looked down at the blue world below, and for just a moment, he almost admired them. "Let us see how long their courage lasts." The extinction protocol began at dawn on the 31st day, and the sky burned with Fire Dominion warships descended on every major city, their weapons tearing through the clouds like angry gods coming down to punish those who had dared to defy them in Beijing. Plasma beams carved through skyscrapers, and millions of people ran screaming through the streets in London. The ancient city that had survived so many wars throughout history shook under the bombardment. But its people did not flee. They ran toward the shelters that had been prepared, exactly as they had been trained in New York, Los Angeles, Moscow, Cairo, Mumbai, Sao Paulo, and 100 other cities. The Dominion unleashed death from above, and humanity answered from hidden silos across the planet. Missiles rose into the sky, not nuclear weapons, which would have destroyed human cities along with the enemy. But something new. Dr. Tanaka's team had worked for 28 days without sleep, and they had created weapons that targeted the specific frequencies of Dominion shield technology. The first wave of missiles struck the descending warships, and to the shock of the Dominion officers, their shields flickered and failed. "Impossible!" screamed the captain of the warship Eternal Dominance as human weapons tore through his hull. "How do these primitives have this technology?" He never received an answer. His ship exploded 3 seconds later, lighting up the sky above Sydney like a second sun. But the Dominion had not conquered 800 worlds by being unprepared after the initial shock. They adapted their shields, and human missiles began bouncing harmlessly off the warships once again. "Ground forces are landing," General Stone reported from the command bunker. "They are deploying infantry in every major city." Vasquez watched the tactical display showing thousands of Dominion soldiers pouring out of landing craft. Then we meet them on the ground. The Velthari ground troops were terrifying creatures, 8 feet tall with bodies of living crystal harder than diamond, carrying weapons that could vaporize a human with a single shot. They had crushed countless species beneath their boots, and they expected the humans to break and run like all the others. They were wrong in the streets of Singapore. Sergeant Reyes led her squad of 20 soldiers against a Dominion force of over 1,000. They wore experimental exoskeletal armor that had been developed in secret over the last decade, giving them the strength to fight hand-to-hand with the Crystal Warriors. "Remember your training," Reyes shouted as plasma fire filled the air around them. "They're bigger, but they're slow. Get in close and stay moving." Her soldiers obeyed, ducking through the urban terrain they knew so well, using every building and alley to their advantage. A Velthry warrior stepped around a corner and raised its weapon at Private Chun. But before it could fire, Reyes was there. She drove her enhanced fist into the joint where the creature's arm met its body. And to her savage satisfaction, the crystal cracked. The warrior screamed a high, singing sound like breaking glass, and Reyes finished it with a blade to the neck. "They bleed." She shouted to her troops, "They can die. Kill them all." Across the city, similar battles raged. The Dominion expected the humans to surrender after seeing their superior firepower and their inhuman soldiers. Instead, the humans fought harder. They fought from rooftops and sewers. They fought with guns, with knives, with their bare hands when nothing else remained. They fought like they had nothing to lose, because they didn't in the command bunker. General Stone received reports from every front, and despite the death toll climbing higher every minute, he allowed himself a grim smile. "They're taking losses they never expected," he said. "Our people are holding, but not winning," Vasquez replied, watching the display. "We need to buy more time for the infiltration teams." She turned to Director Chun's status. 11 teams have made contact with Dominion ships under the guise of surrender delegations, Chun reported. 7 have successfully planted devices. The others were discovered and executed. He paused. "We need at least 3 more successful placements to ensure complete coverage of the fleet. Then we hold." Vasquez decided, whatever it costs. The cost was terrible in Mumbai. An entire division of Indian soldiers was wiped out defending a civilian evacuation route. But they bought 3 hours for 2 million people to reach safety in Berlin. German and French forces fought side by side for the first time since their ancient wars ended, dying together to protect a hospital full of children in Chicago. American soldiers detonated an underground gas line, burying a Dominion landing force beneath 1 million tons of rubble and themselves along with it. Every hour brought new reports of heroism and sacrifice, of ordinary people becoming legends in their final moments. Ambassador Thalvex watched the battle from orbit, and what he saw disturbed him more than he would ever admit. "They should have broken by now," he said to his second-in-command. "No species fights like this, not when they know they cannot win." His officers studied the tactical data. "Perhaps they do not know they cannot win." "Ambassador, impossible. They can see our numbers. They know our technology." "Yes," his officer agreed. "But I have been studying their communications, and I have noticed something strange." "What?" "They're not talking about survival. They are talking about how much damage they can do before they die." Thalvex said nothing. "Their soldiers do not fight to live, Ambassador. They fight to make us pay for every meter of ground, for every human life, for every second of this invasion." The officer's voice was uncertain. "I do not understand this mindset. It is not rational." "No," Thalvex replied quietly. "It is not." He thought about the human history he had studied, about the battles where humans had faced impossible odds and chosen to fight anyway. But perhaps that is precisely why they are so dangerous. Back on Earth, in the ruins of Singapore, Sergeant Reyes received new orders through her damaged communication device. "All forces, fall back to secondary positions." Repeat. "Fall back to secondary positions around the fusion reactor." Reyes looked at her squad. Only 8 soldiers remained from the original 20. "You heard the order. Move." They ran through the burning streets, dodging plasma fire and falling debris. Until they reached the massive building that housed the city's main power source, other survivors were already there. Setting up defensive positions, a young lieutenant approached Reyes. "What's the plan, Sergeant?" Reyes looked at the building behind them, then at the Dominion forces advancing from every direction. "We hold this position no matter what." "Why? What's so important about a power plant?" Reyes didn't answer. She couldn't tell him that the fusion reactor was not just a power plant. It was a weapon if the evacuation tunnels beneath the city were compromised. If the civilians did not escape, her orders were clear: destroy the reactor, take the enemy with them. "Just fight," she told the lieutenant. "Fight until you can't fight anymore." The young man nodded, gripping his weapon tighter. "Yes, Sergeant," as the Dominion forces surrounded them. As the sky above filled with enemy ships and the ground shook with the footsteps of crystal warriors, Sergeant Ana Reyes smiled. "They expected us to surrender." She thought they were wrong for 11 hours. They held the reactor for 11 hours. They died one by one. But they never retreated, and when the last defender fell and the Dominion finally breached the building, when Reyes lay broken and bleeding with her hand on the emergency destruct switch, she looked up at the Veltri warrior standing over her and laughed. "You wanted Earth?" She whispered. She pressed the button. "Take this instead." 3 Dominion capital ships vanished in the explosion that followed, and across the galaxy, the legend of Earth's fury was born. The explosion of the Singapore reactor changed everything for the first time in 3,000 years of conquest. The Dominion fleet suffered losses it could not replace. 3 capital ships each, carrying 10,000 warriors and weapons capable of devastating entire continents, gone in a single moment because one human soldier refused to die. Quietly, Ambassador Thalvex stood on the bridge of his flagship and stared at the empty space where those ships had been. "How?" he whispered. His tactical officer's voice shook when he answered. "The human, the one called Reyes, she triggered a controlled overload of the fusion reactor, and the explosion was channeled upward through prepared blast tubes." Thalvex turned slowly. "Prepared?" "Yes, Ambassador, they built the reactor with this possibility in mind. Decades ago." The officer swallowed. "They have been preparing for us long before we arrived." Before Thalvex could respond, alarms began screaming across the bridge. "Ambassador, we are detecting massive power fluctuations in our fold space drives." "What? That's impossible. Run a diagnostic." "We already did, sir. It's not a malfunction. Something is actively disrupting our systems." Across the Dominion fleet, every ship experienced the same sudden failure. Engineers scrambled to find the source, opening panels and running scans, and on 17 ships, they found small devices hidden in impossible locations, inside sealed compartments within the drive cores themselves, placed by the human surrender delegations who had been invited aboard, the infiltrators. Thalvex realized they were never trying to surrender. They were. The devices activated simultaneously. A wave of energy rippled through the Sol system, and every fold space drive in the Dominion fleet went dark. "Drive status." Thalvex shouted. "Offline, Ambassador, all drives are offline." "How long until repairs?" His engineer's face was pale. "Sir, the drives are not damaged. The quantum tunneling necessary for fold space travel is simply not functioning. It's as if the laws of physics have changed in this system." Thalvex understood then what the humans had done. They had not just disabled the fleet. They had trapped it. No reinforcements could arrive. No ship could escape. The hunter had become the prey. "This changes nothing," Thalvex declared, forcing his voice to remain steady. "We still outnumber them. We still outgun them. We will crush them with the forces we have." But even as he spoke, new alarms sounded. "Ambassador, we are detecting weapons fire in the asteroid belt." The tactical display zoomed outward to show the outer reaches of the solar system. And Thalvex felt his ancient heartstop ships were emerging from behind asteroids' human ships. Hundreds of them, hidden in the darkness of space for who knows how long. They were smaller than Dominion vessels. But they were fast and they were armed. And they were attacking with savage precision sleeper ships, his tactical officer reported with disbelief. They hid an entire fleet in the asteroid belt. We never detected them. The human ships did not fight like proper warships. They darted in and out of the asteroid field, using the rocks as cover, striking at isolated Dominion vessels and vanishing before reinforcements could arrive. They fought like wolves hunting much larger prey, wearing them down bite by bite. And that was not the worst of it. Ground forces are reporting coordinated human counterattacks. Another officer shouted, "They're pushing back on every front. They're pushing back." On Earth, humanity had revealed its final secret. The artificial intelligence systems, hidden for 50 years, had been unleashed. They coordinated every human soldier, every weapon, every defensive position into a single, perfect fighting force. Soldiers who had been scattered and isolated suddenly received precise orders telling them exactly where to strike. Weapons that had seemed useless now fired in coordinated patterns that exploited tiny weaknesses in Dominion defenses. Evacuations that should have failed were guided through routes the enemy could not predict. Dr. Sarah Webb stood in the AI command center, watching the battle unfold on 100 screens. "It's working," she said with tears in her eyes. "My God, it's actually working." The IAS voice filled the room. "Human forces have achieved local superiority in 47 combat zones. I recommend shifting resources to the Pacific Theater where Dominion forces are attempting to establish a beachhead. Do it." Webb ordered. "Already in progress." Dr. Webb, far above, Ambassador Thalvex watched his fleet being torn apart piece by piece. "Pull back," he finally ordered, something no Dominion commander had done in 1,000 years. "All ships, pull back to high orbit, regroup, and reassess." The Dominion fleet retreated, and across Earth, humans looked up at the sky and cheered. They had not won, not yet, but they had survived, and more than that, they had hurt the enemy as the battle paused. Thalvex received the transmission from the human flagship, Ambassador Thalvex. Secretary General Vasquez's voice came through clearly. "I think it's time we had a conversation. You wish to negotiate surrender?" Thalvex asked, though he already knew the answer. "Yours." "Perhaps, certainly not ours." Despite everything, Thalvex found himself admiring her courage. "I will meet with you," he decided. 1 hour. Neutral space between our fleets. Agreed. The meeting took place on a small shuttle. Surrounded by warships from both sides, Vasquez arrived with only 2 guards. Thalvex came with 6, and still felt outnumbered. The human woman was smaller than he expected, her body fragile compared to his crystal form. But when she looked at him, her eyes held no fear. "Why?" Thalvex asked without preamble. "Why did you choose extinction over submission? No species has ever done this. Your survival was guaranteed if you had simply obeyed." Vasquez studied him for a long moment. "Let me show you something." She activated a holographic display, and images began to appear, images from human history. "This is Thermopylae," she said, showing 300 warriors facing an army of millions. These men knew they would die, but they fought anyway to buy time for others. The image changed. "This is Masada. Nearly 1,000 people chose death over slavery." Another image, Stalingrad, a city that refused to fall, no matter the cost. And another, the Warsaw Uprising, people with almost no weapons fighting tanks and aircraft, just to say that they would not go quietly. She turned off the display. "You see submission as survival. Ambassador, you think that a life on your knees is still a life." She stepped closer to him, and somehow, even though he towered over her, she seemed larger. "We see it as death, a death that just takes longer to finish. She held his gaze. We would rather burn standing than live on our knees. We would rather our children inherit a memory of courage than a legacy of cowardice. Dalvex was silent for a long time. Would truly destroy yourselves rather than serve. We would destroy everything rather than serve, Vasquez replied. Every city, every ship, every last human being would die fighting before we would kneel. She smiled. And it was not a pleasant expression. But here's the thing. Ambassador, we're not going to have to destroy ourselves. She gestured to the window, where the trapped Dominion fleet hung in the darkness, because we're not the ones who are surrounded anymore. Dalvex looked at his fleet battered, isolated, unable to retreat or receive help, and he understood what the human woman was telling him. Dominion had come to Earth to conquer. They had awakened something that should have been left sleeping, and now, trapped in this system with no way out, they faced a species that had spent its entire existence learning how to win impossible wars. What do you propose? Dalvex asked quietly. Vasquez's smile widened. Surrender. 1 year after the Dominion came to Earth, the galaxy changed forever. The war had ended not with a final battle, but with a surrender, and for the first time in 3,000 years. It was not humanity who knelt. Ambassador Dalvex had returned to his fleet with Secretary General Vasquez's terms. Immediate cessation of hostilities, release of all captured humans, and the turning over of 70% of all Dominion vessels to human control. His officers had been outraged. We cannot surrender, one captain screamed during the emergency council. The Dominion has never surrendered. It would be the end of everything we have built. Look around you, Dalvex replied with weary calm. Everything we have built is already ending. He gestured at the tactical display showing their trapped fleet, now reduced to less than half its original strength. We cannot leave this system. We cannot receive reinforcements, and every day we fight, we lose more ships while the humans grow stronger. He looked at each of his officers in turn. I have studied these creatures more than any of you. I have learned their history, their nature, their minds, and I tell you this. They will not stop. His voice dropped to a whisper. They will fight until every last one of them is dead. And they will take us with them, not because they hate us, but because surrender is simply not something they understand. The council was silent. We came here expecting to find another conquered species, another tribute world to add to our empire. Dalvex shook his head. Instead, we found something that should not exist, a species that sees death as preferable to chains, that treats impossible odds as a personal challenge, that becomes more dangerous the harder you push them. He made his decision. I will not throw away our remaining forces in a war we cannot win. I accept the human terms. 3 days later, the formal surrender was signed, but humanity did not simply accept victory and return to their lives. They had learned something during the war, something that would change the course of galactic history. They had learned that the galaxy was not empty. They had learned that other species lived among the stars, conquered and enslaved by the Dominion for thousands of years. And they had learned that the Dominion could be beaten. Dr. Yuki Tanaka led the team that reverse-engineered the captured fold space technology. And within months, the first human vessel capable of faster-than-light travel was ready. It was named the Prometheus, after the mythical figure who stole fire from the gods and gave it to humanity's Secretary General. Vasquez addressed the world and the watching galaxy before its launch. 1 year ago, we were alone, a small species on a small planet, unaware of the universe around us. She stood before the massive ship, its hull gleaming in the light of the sun it would soon leave behind. Then the Dominion came, and they demanded that we kneel, that we accept our place as servants in their empire. Her voice rang with pride. We refused, and today, we take our first steps into a galaxy that the Dominion has ruled for 3,000 years. She looked directly at the cameras that broadcast her words to 100 conquered worlds. We are not coming as conquerors. We are not coming to build our own empire on the ashes of theirs. She raised her fist. We are coming to share what we learned on Earth. That no species has to kneel. That freedom is worth fighting for. And that even the mightiest empires can fall before those who refuse to surrender. The Prometheus launched the next day, carrying a crew of 300 humans and a message that would shake the stars to every world that had submitted to the Dominion. Humanity sent the same words. We freed ourselves. We will help you do the same. The response was beyond anything they could have imagined on the mining world of Kethra. The insectoid Vethkai rose up against their dominion. Masters within hours of receiving the human message. They had been slaves for 800 years. And they had never forgotten the taste of freedom on the ocean planet Azuro. The aquatic Mirren, who had served as engineers on Dominion ships, began sabotaging their own vessels. When Dominion forces came to punish them, human warships arrived first on 100 worlds across a dozen sectors. Species that had been compliant for centuries suddenly remembered what defiance felt like. The Dominion tried to crush the rebellions, as they always had. But nothing worked the way it used to. Their fleets were weakened by the losses at Earth. Their officers were demoralized by the impossible defeat, and everywhere they turned, they found humans teaching captured peoples how to fight, sharing weapons technology, coordinating resistance movements across light years of space. General Marcus Stone led the first human military expedition beyond Sol System, and when he returned 6 months later, he brought with him delegates from 17 liberated worlds, all of them asking to join an alliance against what remained of the Dominion. The United Species Federation was formed on the anniversary of humanity's victory, with its capital on Earth and its military commanded by officers from a dozen different species. A cratery general Vasquez addressed the first Federation assembly with Ambassador Thalvex standing beside her, no longer a prisoner, but an advisor who had chosen to help dismantle the empire he once served. Why did you join us? A journalist asked him after the ceremony. Thalvex thought about the question for a long time, because I finally understood what the humans tried to tell me during the war. He looked out the window at the city below, rebuilt, thriving, filled with humans and aliens living together. The Dominion believed that strength came from dominance, that the only way to rule was to force others to obey. He shook his head. The humans taught me something different. They showed me that true strength comes from standing together, from protecting each other, from fighting for something beyond yourself. He turned back to the journalist. I spent 300 years conquering worlds for an empire built on fear. I would like to spend whatever time I have left helping build something better. 5 years after first contact, the Dominion was gone. Its core worlds had collapsed into civil war as conquered species rose up everywhere. Its fleets had been destroyed or captured. Its leaders had fled to unknown regions of space, never to be heard from again. And in its place, the Federation grew, not conquering, but welcoming, not demanding tribute, but offering partnership. General Stone retired to a small farm on Mars, where he spent his remaining years teaching young soldiers the lessons he had learned in the war for Earth. Dr. Tanaka continued her research, eventually discovering entirely new ways to travel through space that made the old Dominion technology look primitive. Director Chun became the first human ambassador to the Vethkai homeworld, where he spent years helping them rebuild their civilization. Dr. Webb and her AI systems became the backbone of Federation communications, connecting worlds separated by impossible distances into a single community. And Secretary General Vasquez, she served 3 more terms before finally stepping down. And when she did, she gave one final address to the Federation she had helped create long ago. A powerful empire looked at our small blue world and saw easy prey They thought we would kneel, because everyone else had. She smiled, and in her eyes there was the same fire that had burned there on the day she had defied the Dominion. They did not understand that kneeling was never an option for us, that we would rather burn than bow, that we would rather die free than live as slaves. She looked out at the assembly filled with faces of 100 different species, all of them free, because humanity had refused to surrender. They demanded tribute from Earth, and humanity's answer shook the stars. She raised her hand in a final salute. May we never forget the price of that freedom, and may we always be willing to pay it. Again, across the Federation, on human worlds and alien worlds alike, the story of Earth's defiance passed from generation to generation. Parents told their children of the impossible war, of the humans who had faced a galactic empire and refused to kneel. What would have happened if they had surrendered? Children asked, and the answer was always the same. Then the galaxy would still be in chains, but they didn't surrender. And that is why we are free. The tale became legend, then myth, then something more. A promise written in the hearts of every species that had joined the Federation. If you come for Earth, Earth will come for you. And out among the stars, humanity was just getting started.